the agenda.
So moved.
Ron, need a second for the agenda?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda passes. Next up would be approval for the minutes from the October 13th Personnel Committee meeting.
I have couple of things that I want to discuss about that. Is this where to do it?
Usually that's handled prior to the meeting, but if you're wanting to,
Well, I need input, so.
okay, go ahead.
Okay, a couple of things. One thing on to the page. Well, when I'm opening up, it's page 8 on the page. I'm not sure if that's really the page, but we're under the DEI audit report.
Mhm.
So we have explain what's going on, that the report was made, and I just don't know why it's like these are minutes, and I feel like it's explained on pages. And I just feel like that's all we need for the minutes is that one paragraph. And we don't need to, I'm sure the report is somewhere if somebody wants to see it, they can look at the whole report. But I've never seen minutes to where it's like pages explaining the report.
Actually, that's been our procedure in the past for other reports that have been presented to the board, such as the audit.
Well, I've never just seen this myself. And so that would be my thing that I think it would be better if we took out where it says key internal interview themes all the way down to when it's Ms. Carter Hicks noted the recommendation, because I just think that should be something we can look up, because I can't vote to approve these as is until I go through, and I'd have to look at this with the report and confirm that every one of these points is correct.
And that usually occurs before our meeting.
Yeah, so
Um,
I'm just I want to tell you my 2 recommendations is that be taken off, and then people can look up if they want to see the rest of the, if they want to see the full report, they can see the full report. So that is my one recommendation there. My other recommendation, I don't want this to sound too personal, like I have some chip on my shoulder, which I don't, but in the minutes, I'm referred to as Miss Pandolfi, which is fine. One of my titles in a professional situation, I prefer it to read, and I have mentioned this to Teresa before, prefer it to say Dr. Pandolfi. And I mean, this is sort of a case in point that this whole thing is we are talking about gender equality. So when you're referring to the woman with a doctorate as Ms., and then in the report you say the man that has a doctorate as Dr. Van Growinger or whatever his name was. So I just feel like that should be changed, and that we should be
that can be changed.
that we should be making note of that in the future. Not for me, I don't really care, but I do think that you need to have the equality between men and women with doctorates. So anyway, I didn't want to, feel that is that personal. I hope everyone in this room will just refer to me by my first name. But what we're doing here, I believe, is serious, and I think we should use our formal titles. So anyway, that was my second point.
Okay, I think the second point can be handled without any caution. We'll do that going forward.
I've got it written as doctor in the other places, but in the minutes it was.
Yeah, I know, Teresa, you
I'll change it.
you don't have anything against me. I know that.
I'll change it.
I'm just talking about, in the future for other people.
Yeah, sure.
So now my first recommendation, is it something we would vote on? How is that handled?
Oh, if I can, so
Go
a
ahead.
couple things. So the first thing, that Noel and Michelle are both online, just
Okay,
FYI.
good.
So, and then, yeah, the second issue is one of style, and it just, it's true of anybody. I mean, however you want to be referred to in the minutes, let Teresa know, and she will do that.
Well, the point is not just that, but I mean, is when you're just saying doctor so-and-so for the man and not for the woman, we need to do what we're saying in our.
Sure.
equality.
Sure. And then I would also suggest that the level of depth of the minutes is also one of style. If we go back 15 years ago or so, when I first started attending board meetings, the suggestion was the exact opposite, that our board minutes were so sparse that if you did not attend the meeting, you didn't have a feeling for what was even discussed. And so we started making them more deeper, more robust. If the feeling is that we're making them too robust, I mean, we can change the style. That's perfectly fine. We just need direction. Teresa and I need direction on what is the preference of the committee and the board, and we will follow that.
Well, I feel like in this issue, in other issues, I don't see the same link. So that was my point, that I think, it is hard to make those calls, I'm sure. But in this was just my recommendation that we just need a paragraph of that, then everything else until our personal comments be scrapped.
I mean, in terms of minutes, it's true of any minutes. I mean, the purpose of minutes is to record what happened at the meeting. If the feeling is that the record is too detailed, you could make a motion to have those stricken. We could have a vote, and we could determine if that's what we wanted to do, and then direction as to what we want to do moving forward, or not. So that's my recommendation. In terms of rules, that's what we do.
The other issues in terms of transparency, especially since our meetings have been virtual, I think that not everything is conveyed in the presentation. So I think that in terms of a report, having, a PowerPoint is a document that kind of guides you. It does not contain everything. And I for one, appreciated the level of detail that was reported in the minutes.
Well, that was just my suggestion, maybe. Rita.
I have a question to Ron, and that is, you probably have a Juris Doctorate. Do you want to be called Dr. Ron Thewis?
It makes me feel older now. Honestly, no.
I mean,
I generally say you, so that I don't care at all.
right. Well, it's an honorary thing, and I have a daughter who has a doctorate, and she gets upset if I don't put Dr. Weezy on her letters. So
Well, you're the mom, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, that's right. And then I also looked at the DEI, that it kind of struck me that there was a sense of superfluous. Do we have to say so much about the details, especially where I was concerned? Because my questions were not answered adequately, I don't think. So then I think rather than just leave them hang, I would take them out. I would not put them in.
I think that if we're going to change our style, we need some kind of structure so that we're not just so that our reporter can get it accurate across every single issue.
I think that's maybe for later. I think for right now, I just want to stick with my recommendation for this particular thing, if I may. So I wouldn't
So
mind making.
amending the minutes to remove the sections that you said before.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, that's what we would need.
I'll just make a motion to just include that one paragraph about the DEI report so I will make a motion that would remove the key internal interview themes all the way down to a few pages later where under next steps, Ms. Carter Hicks noted. So that would be my motion to just remove that lengthy section.
Report, okay.
Now, just a point of clarification, this is Susan Wilson.
Yes, Susan.
Tell me again your rationale for wanting to do that.
I feel like it's too lengthy for that with this one section.
Now, have we had other lengthy sections in minutes?
I've not noticed something quite this lengthy before, and most times I've noticed, some people have been on the board longer, that we have not had pages and pages for this one thing. So that's why I'm making the motion here. I feel like we have the report. If somebody wants to see the report, they can see the report in its entirety. But for the minutes, I feel like we should just keep it to the paragraph.
Did we have a second?
No, we haven't had a second yet.
I'll second.
Hey, this is Michelle. I need a minute. I'm just getting on my computer and getting everything pulled up. I'm so sorry. We ran very late today. So I need a minute to even catch up to where we're at and read this just really quick. I need like 1 minute. I'm sorry.
Well, while she's reading, I think it is important to track the questions and answers that were asked, because obviously there were questions that people had in mind. To me, this is an informational.
It doesn't take
Well,
out any of the questions.
excuse me, but
Yeah.
if I may finish.
Yes.
This is an informational as well as a record document. And if people have questions from the board, I'm sure they're reflected in questions from the community. And for me, it is a issue of transparency.
Okay, well, if I can comment on your comment, is that the things that I had cut were just the summary. It was not anyone's comments. So all the comments are left.
Well, I think the summary is important.
Well, they can look up the full document.
Minutes are supposed to be summaries.
Okay, well, that's my motion.
Okay. My suggestion is, if people are uncomfortable with comments, that's one thing, but I think that it's important as a matter of record to have a summary of what has been presented beyond just telling people, well, look up the document. I think that doesn't serve the community, and I think that it does not serve transparency as a public institution.
So while Michelle is catching up, I just want to make sure that I'm just restating the motion to make sure that we have it. So basically it is a motion.
I'm caught up.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Michelle. But I still want to double check this and make sure that I'm reading it correctly.
That's fine.
So on section 5, DEI report, discussion information, 5.1 DEI report, and then there's a 2 or 3 sentence paragraph that's right there. And then the suggestion after that paragraph was to strike key interview themes, external stakeholder themes, focus, DEI, HR people, employee demographics, and next steps.
Yes.
Okay.
All the way down to
All-
underneath number 4.
All the way down to where it says recommendation to
No,
where it's
no.
the vote.
No, all the way down to where it says Ms. Carter Hicks
Mhm.
noted so after number 4, that's where you would, of next steps, that's where the splice would stop.
I see. Okay.
So
Okay.
then
Gotcha.
we have all of the comments of
Okay.
the
Yeah.
board members and the auditors.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure that I was
Yeah.
tracking.
Thank you for clarifying.
I just have to say this. I'll just be honest. This feels to me like another attempt to silence the voices of people who took the time to be a part of this. This committee has, the board has already chosen not to even acknowledge that we got the report. And now to strike it from the minutes, I think is another indication that it's an erasure to me. And I don't feel that that is appropriate. Because these are voices of people who are our employees. They're the voices of people who are our stakeholders, and the voices of people who have taken the time to share their honest feelings. And I think that that sends a message beyond just that there's too much detail. I think that it violates transparency, and is actually not something that I can support.
Well, you know, I'm sorry you feel that way, because it's in no way, that is in no way the intention. Just feels like, you know, on the other half, it feels like the majority of the board, we heard the discussion, are not in line with their findings. And so to me, this report as it is, looks like we are endorsing that. So that is one reason
And
that,
to take it off looks like we are rejecting.
no, it's not, because if the report is there. It is there for antiquity, and it is noted what happened. So,
And I feel it should be reflected in our minutes.
and all of the comments are reflected in the minutes.
The report should be reflected in our minutes.
Okay, well, I appreciate your thoughts, and I know it's just some things we disagree on.
Excuse me, this is Michelle. Is the report, is that available to anybody?
The report is on board.
It's in.
Right, so, okay, there you go.
It's and if I'm not mistaken, I think the committee meeting is archived on the YouTube channel too, so.
Right.
I just think that if you remove the summary, people won't know to look for it. It's to me kind of like, I think the summary will allow people to go deeper. The summary this is not a repeat of the report. It's a summary of the report. And I think it has every right to be in the minutes, my opinion.
And I call the question.
Okay,
It's a privilege motion. Question is called.
okay. Can we do a roll call vote? It's been called.
Could I just, before you call the vote?
And you can read it one more time if you don't mind, Steve.
Yeah, we will do that.
The
Well,
vote has been called.
Yeah, calling the question's a privilege motion.
It stops discussion.
It stops all discussion.
Okay.
So the motion on the floor is to strike sections of the minutes of the meeting, starting with key interview themes, correct?
Yes.
Going all the way down to after next steps, line 4, conduct a formal DEI employee survey. That would be the last stricken area, and then resume the minutes.
Correct.
Hey, can you do a roll call vote, Teresa?
Sure, okay. So we'll just take the vote here. Wait just a second, sorry.
Takes you a second to get the the vote interface up.
Okay, we'll take the vote. Joycelyn,
No.
Michelle,
Yes.
Rita? Yes. Ron?
I'm going to abstain, frankly, as long as we had a motion, a second, and the resolution was stated. I frankly don't care. Okay.
Yummy, I'm sorry, Ian. I'm gonna call you Dr. Panda.
No, please call me Yummy.
Okay, okay. Yummy,
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Susan,
Nay.
The motion carries. That
Motion carries. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I
And-
have a question.
Oh,
This is Susan. Can I?
It's also about
We'll get to you right next, Susan.
Okay.
Yes.
my question is, on page 11, the proposal was 53,000 for the audit and first stages of implementation. 53,000 was listed here, is that correct?
yes.
In the finance part of our last board meeting, it was 15,000. Is that a misprint?
No, but I can't. I'm not sure what the 15,000 is that you're referring to.
It was the Kaufman grant for the DEI audit. It's on board docs.
Yeah, I'll have to see what you're referring to, but yeah, no, the audit the entire audit proposal is $53,000.
The amount listed in the minutes is correct.
That is correct, yes.
That is correct, okay.
That is correct.
Susan,
I just wanted to.
can you turn up your volume, Susan?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment that I will be very vigilant from now on, watching what is placed in the minutes, because I think the deletion of parts of the minutes is not something we do usual and customary from what I can see. And I just think if we're going to do it in this instance, then there should be other instances where we're deleting parts of the minutes. I think I have to agree with Joycelyn that this undermines our transparency as a board. And I just want to go on record saying that.
Thank you, Susan.
Last thing that I just want to sew up from a staff perspective. So in terms of style, we have heard that there's a couple of things that we wanted to try to do in terms of style, and Teresa and I will work on that. So, okay.
Okay. Next up would be, we need to approve the minutes.
Yes, because they've been amended. So now we actually
Approve
have
the
to
amended
approve them.
minutes.
Right. Thank you. I would have missed that.
Yeah. I'm trying to find over here. Okay, sorry. Can you take another roll call? I mean, well, moved and it's been moved and second. We just need to prove it, right? Was it? No one.
Motion, yes, the motion was moved and seconded, and then we had the discussion in the amendment. And so now we have to,
Now we have to move the amended minutes.
the amended minutes, yes. So yes, there's a new, because they've been amended.
The roll call vote?
Joycelyn,
No.
Michelle,
We're voting on the amended minutes, correct?
Correct.
Okay, aye.
yes, Michelle.
Yeah, that was I.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, aye, sorry, yes.
Okay, so thank you. Rita?
Yes.
Yes. Ron?
Sure.
Yemi?
Yes.
Noel?
Yes.
Susan? Susan?
Susan, you're muted.
Susan, are you there? Cody, can you see if she's still on the call?
She shows to be on the participant list, but it's muted.
Yes.
Give her a second.
Could we ask her to, can she type like a message? If she can hear us, maybe she could just type or yes or no.
Susan, are you there? You can forward me your vote if you would like, just based on the votes that I have right now, then that the motion carries.
Right, so even regardless of her vote,
Yes,
will carry.
yes.
Okay.
So
All
we
right.
have
And so, yeah,
five yeses and one no and one vote that we are not aware of, which would be for Susan.
the vote present at this point.
Yes.
Okay, so okay.
I'd kind of like to make sure that Dr. Wilson's can be part of the discussion going forward as well. I would hate for somebody not to be able to participate because of technical.
For technical.
I wonder if she can hear us. Cody, and it looks like she's still on the call.
Yes, it does look like Dr. Wilson's still on the call. Let me send a direct message.
Okay.
Thanks, Cody. Keep us posted, please.
We want to go on to goal attainment. You want to wait?
It's your call. It's up to you.
Let's wait. I'd like
Okay.
I don't like anyone to be left out.
Hey, and this is Michelle. I need to leave. I may have to switch off my iPad onto my phone and drive because I do like at 10 or 10, sorry. At 7, I'm probably going to have to drop off.
Okay. Hopefully we'll be done by then. We only have
Yeah,
two-
I hope so
meeting.
too. Just in case. I just wanted to let you guys know.
I've tried texting her as well.
The problem with this great technology we have.
Oh, okay. While we're waiting, and I was able to pull this up and look at this, what Rita was referring to in the earlier question. So I pulled up our finance and facility managers report of the grants and gifts fund, which does show a Kaufman grant for DEI for $15,000, exactly as Rita said. But those are two different initiatives. The Kaufman grant for $15,000 was something separate from the DEI funding that they gave us. So Kaufman has given us about, well, coming close to
$68,000, right?
roughly, yeah, to fund these initiatives.
Interesting.
Okay, Cody, you have Susan back?
I have not seen gotten a message back in response to mine.
Oh, she's there?
Oh, there she is.
Okay.
Good.
Did you want to give us your vote on the amended minutes?
I thought I already did.
Oh, we couldn't hear you.
When you.
Oh, did you forward it to Teresa?
When you voted for the amended minutes, I voted.
I'm checking now. Just give me 1 second.
Maybe she doesn't realize she's really breaking up.
Did everybody hear?
Oh,
We're having real difficulty hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
You're fading in and out.
yeah.
Are you on a headset or a microphone, Susan? That sometimes doesn't.
Okay, well, I'll put my vote
That's
in the
much
chat.
better.
That's very clear. That's very clear.
Okay, but I voted nay for the
Okay,
amendment to the minutes.
All right.
Okay, and then, okay, now that was the amendment to the minutes, and then we had to vote on the amended minutes, the new minutes as they were amended. So what was your vote on the new minutes as amended?
So are you saying it was the same as the first amendment?
Oh, you're muzzled again.
Yeah, we lost you
I
again.
don't know what's going on.
Sorry.
Was the second amendment the same as the first?
Yeah, so what happened was the amendment passed. So the minutes were abbreviated. We'll say that amended, they were abbreviated. And so now we have to take a vote on accepting or adopting the abbreviated minutes or the amendment.
Okay, and my vote would still be no.
Would be no, okay.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for bearing with us through the technology challenges. So
Okay.
on to goal attainment.
If we're not hearing you, you can alert me or Teresa or Cody or in the, that we want to make sure that you're included in our discussions.
You
this
can,
evening.
yeah, you can definitely type in the chat box and Cody can relay to us or Teresa can see it. So if we're having problems here.
Okay. Next up is the director's goal attainment. I'll turn that over to Steve.
Okay.
Well, before I turn it over to you.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, because we have so many new board members, the director's goals are tied to the calendar year, right? Because that helps us with
the budgeting.
our budgeting and with our statistics and our ability to monitor how the goals are being attained. So that's different from our fiscal year. So we're going to be looking at the progress on the stated goals from 2021. And then Mr. Carter is going to look at the 2022 goals that will guide us for the next year.
So yeah, so we'll start off with the look back and how we did on the previous year's goals. So I think I sent this to everybody in preparation so that you could look at them. I didn't want to flood your inbox with too much, but I do know that all the supporting documents were in board docs so that you could dive in and look at all the supporting documents if you really wanted to. But the summary, Cody, I think if you go to the next page, yeah, it's kind of mice type, but I'll walk you through this. So basically the way that the format works is on the left-hand column were the goals that were adopted by the personnel committee, recommended to the full board, and then adopted by the full board. And so I started working on these with my team a year ago. And the goals that we had, I'll just go through them. That the so the first one and the first sort of large scale goal was that MCPL's management team will implement and foster an organization-wide effort to foster healthy communication and continuous learning among all MCPL staff. And then there were 4 action steps underneath. So the first one is that that the HR team will lead the development of procedures and guidelines to ensure alignment with the MCPL mission, vision, and values. Our feeling is that we did meet this, that the alignment can be seen through the updating of our performance management evaluations and forms. And I believe that the updating of those forms shows that we aligned that with the mission, the vision, and values. The next action step that the tactical team, that's a group of managers, mostly higher level managers, higher and middle level managers at Mid-Continent Public Library. We'll continue to working together on creating healthy communication techniques. And I believe that we did reach that communication is much better amongst this team. More recently, it now appears that this group knows that they are in the room where it happens, as opposed to being told what to do. They understand that they are the ones who are actually acting and carrying things out. We also had an individual working with this team to help foster healthy communication. We have a written report from that individual, Loretta Summers, that does confirm that she feels like they are communicating better together and they understand how to work together as a team. So we feel like we met that one. Next one, management team will adopt these techniques throughout other areas. So in other words, have it in the tactical team, have it in the senior leadership team, push it out even further. I don't feel like we met this one for a number of different reasons. We did start it, but it was mostly due to other points of focus, the pandemic, as well as some pretty exceptional staff turnover that we've had over this last year. So just as we get started, we get new people, we'd have to start over again. So we just really didn't make headway. And it was one that we missed and were not able to reach for any number of different reasons. And then the last one, senior leadership team will support continuing to build an environment of continuous learning, initially developed in 2020. So in the previous year, we started developing sort of a culture of continuous learning where our staff are always learning, getting better, improving. Part of that was around launching a learning management system. It was launched for delivery of content to manage the ongoing. So that's where the ongoing part was, kind of created the culture. Now we created the infrastructure to carry that on in 2021. And that was launched in fall of 2021. And we've actually started loading content into our learning management system. So so the senior leadership team opinion is that of those four, we hit 3 of the 4. Let me pause on each one of these so that we can kind of talk about them as opposed to talking about them all in whole, and answer any questions that you might have about these before we move to the next one.
Any questions?
So it gives me a chance to recaffeinate, so I appreciate that. Okay, so the next one is evaluate and prioritize system-wide services to optimize organizational capacity. In other words, look at what we're doing and make sure that we're doing it in the most efficient and effective ways that we can be doing it. So the first goal was, or the first action step underneath that MCPL senior administration team will develop organizational criteria for evaluating existing services and opportunities, potential areas where programming, processing, warehousing, and central collection warehouse. We feel like we met this. We actually did quite a lot toward these ends. In terms of process and review, it didn't get quite as far as we hoped that it would get due to some personnel issues. We changed our department manager in that area. So it got pretty far along. It probably, in this particular one, we probably missed a step or two, but it did get pretty far along. And we're still, Susan's on the line and she can react to this if we need to, but we have a lot of different goals in terms of throughput for our books. So for example, when a book arrives here at Mid-Continent, I believe that the goal is that it get out from our warehouse to the libraries for people to check it out in, I believe it's 36 hours is our goal. That's 36 clock hours. That's not 36 working hours. That's one of our goals. And that was one of the things that we reaffirmed and did for this. I think Susan told me it's something like 80% or 85% of all of our materials are now coming mostly pre-processed, meaning that they're they're arriving at our docks with stickers on them, barcodes, all of that, which makes them more efficient in terms of getting out faster so that they can serve the public faster. These were the steps that we were trying to achieve and to review and make sure we were doing. That was the goal. That was the goal that we were working on here. Programming review did cease when our consultant contract was canceled, but even with those problems, we are starting in-person programming. In fact, I just saw on our social media that in-person programming is starting up again on the 14th, so Monday. And we did actually start off the first part of in-person programming with our story times last fall. Where I feel that we can show that that we've done what we were looking to optimize our capacity is that when we are starting back up with our programming, we're starting up with about 60% less programming than we had a year ago, or back before we had to cease our programming and started reworking this. That may sound like that's a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. What we're talking about is higher quality and less quantity, and the goal is to have better opportunities for people as opposed to just more opportunities. And so the fact that we're doing this with 60% less, I believe is a good sign that we're actually presenting this more effectively than we did before.
Steve, can I ask a question about that? This is
Yes,
Noel.
please. Yeah, hi, Noel. Go ahead.
So is it really, not, that sounds bad, but is it
No.
really because we're wanting better, more quality programs, or is it a staffing issue or a COVID issue?
No, it's not. It's not the COVID or the staffing issue. It's about quality. That what we were discovering is that there were lots of times where we were doing too much we were providing too much opportunity. And so, I mean, this is not a perfect example. And this isn't a real world example. This is just one that I'm making. But that we might have a story time, for example, at 10 o'clock and one in another part of the library at 10:30. Well, let's just combine them. Let's just combine them, have a better experience. And then we also can only have, we have one team of people working on the story time as opposed to two teams of people working on them independently, which is a better use of time. Susan may be able to refer to more of this because this was her team that worked on this, but a lot of this also had to do with alignment of the story time. So instead of doing, like say, for example, a branch did 10 story times in a week. Instead of doing 10 unique story times, they might only do 5, or they might do 2 unique story times, but do them 5 times each, which is more efficient and allows us to serve more people that way. So yeah, it's really less about staffing and COVID at this point, and it's more about a conscious effort to try to do it better, higher quality, and better opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. But you are right. We are having personnel hiring problems like the rest of the world. that is also true. Let's see. We did talk about that, and we're going to continue to be measuring our outcomes on our programs to make sure that we are getting good reviews and all of that. Because if we do decrease the amount, but then people don't like what we're doing, then that doesn't. Then we need to go back and reinvent the wheel. But for right now, I feel like we're positioned in the right place. Let's see. The other thing that we had here was warehousing. Now we did push off the warehousing projects that we had, in part because of delays in the construction of the Green Hills Library and the decision to tear down North Oak and rebuild it from the ground up. The original plan was to build North Oak someplace else and then move it, but now we're going to have to store the collection somewhere. And when you store the collection somewhere, it took away the opportunity for us to figure out how to better use the warehouse. So that was kind of taken off of our table. But when we look at all of this, we do still feel like we made really good headway on the areas where we could work. And so we felt like we did meet this goal. The tactical team, again, remember that group of managers will inventory and evaluate existing system-wide services using the criteria established by the senior leadership team in 2019. And so we did evaluate several legacy programs, and I tried to include some of those in the board docs where you can see that, where we evaluated things like the summer reading program, like the library to go program, several programs, and tried to figure out which ones were not creating the impact that we needed to. We're not creating the outreach that we're needed to. And if they were no longer meeting their needs, then to consider eliminating them, because that's something that you can consider. We did actually, I think we targeted at least one program for elimination. It was the Library to Go program that was in some community centers, just because we just were not getting the activity that we used to get out of those. But we also were beginning to see other programs where we were getting a lot of good outcomes. And so, those are the ones where you might double down because we're getting good outcomes. So we feel like we have a good model for us to every so often stop and look at what we're doing, figure out if we're doing it well. If we are doing it well, carry on. If we're not doing it well, or it's no longer meeting its need, to consider how to turn it back. So that's where we are with that. And that is that goal. So let me take a sip here to give people an opportunity to ask questions before we go to the next set.
You just mentioned the senior leadership team was a group of managers. Is that different from the management team?
Yeah, the senior leadership team are the people they're my direct reports. So people like Teresa, Susan, Ray, the assistant director, Susan Ray, Richie Moman, who you've met, who's in charge of all the branches. Jennifer, who's on the call, who's in charge of our HR department. The tactical team is sort of that next level down. So they're going to be people like the people who's in charge of our electronic resources collection, who work under Brian Gash, or trying to think of some other people who are on the tactical team, our acquisitions and collections development staff who work for Susan. They are on that team. Youth services director and community services directors are on that team. So it's sort of the next level down below, beyond beyond my initial report, sort of my initial reports.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay, so goal number 3, there were really only goal 4s, but there were sub goals within each one of them. And so goal number 3 was revisit and update the organizational pillars. So if you look at the strategic plan, there are these organizational capacity pillars that we have that kind of create the capacity for us to do all the things that we're doing. And the feeling is that if we're pumping things into those organizational capacities, those pillars, that puts us in a position to do the other things that we need to do in the organization. So these were the areas that we identified and that we worked on in 2021. So the first one, Chief Operating Officer will review and update processes around collections, especially focusing on community programming, youth services programming, I should say, and materials acquisitions. And there was a written report, very lengthy written report on that Susan did. That was part of the supporting document. I feel like we did all of this. If you remember from the last board meeting, we talked about how Katie had retooled the summer library program. That was part of this. We just talked a little while ago about bringing back story times. That was a part of this. A little while ago about retooling the community programming. That was a part of this. So we feel like we did, while we were unable to provide those services, we used that time to determine the best way to continue providing those services, which is what we did. The next up, Community Relations and Planning Director, that's Jim Staley, will review the external communications processes, especially focusing on social media and target marketing communication. So in 2021, we centralized all of our social media management. So those of you who have been around for a while might remember that each branch might have their own Facebook and Twitter account and Instagram account, and there were all kinds of issues with that. I mean, I think I read somewhere that we had something like 49 different social media managers or something like that at one point. And so we couldn't have a unified message. We had contradictory messages at sometimes. And so we did consolidate that as part of this process. And that's helped us a lot in terms of being more effective at our reach, but also more effective at our message. We also used our Savannah platform to target message as we reopen locations and close locations. So we have a piece of software that we can send specific messages to people to tell them, your branch is going to be closed for remodels, and we know that you like to use story times. So here's another branch nearby that you can go and do story times, for example. And so we used that platform to make sure that we were communicating effectively with people. We did have that budget enhancement that we talked about recently, where we had a little bit of additional money. And so we focused on trying to bring people back to the libraries. That was managed through the Community Relations and Planning Department. And it did bring people back. And I think also showed that the types of methods that could be useful as we continue to try to talk to people post-pandemic to bring them back and re-engage with the libraries. So I feel like we learned some new things, but we also were pretty effective with that. Next one, Facilities and Finance and Facilities Director, that's Quan, with the Capital Projects Manager, that's Jake, will develop draft capital maintenance plan. So we continued, we started sharing with the finance committee in particular, and also with the building committee, about what we think ongoing building maintenance is going to cost starting next year as we begin to wind down the capital plan. What it's going to cost us to start maintaining our buildings, particularly the older the old new buildings is the way we refer to them. Midwest Genealogy Center, Smithville, North Independence, and Woodney. So those were all buildings that were built new before the capital plan, but now they are our oldest buildings. And so figuring out how to maintain those through 2028, and then the remodeled buildings will start coming in to be maintained after 2028. And those of you on the finance committee know that we actually started referring to ways that we can start saving money starting in 2022, 23, so that we can have the money that we need to start maintaining the buildings moving forward. But more details on the capital project, as you know, wouldn't make much sense for us really to make a detailed maintenance plan that was going to start in 2028 this far out. So the main thing is to start planning for putting the money away and when we'll actually start doing those things. And that's what we started doing this year. And I think quite successfully. The development director, which that's Diana, will review campaign strategies to supplement private giving, especially focusing on consumable services. So, we had several campaigns around consumable services like our MyFi2Go service and our Forever Book Fund. And I think both of those campaigns were quite successful. We also were able to reach full staffing in the development department in 2020. So in 2022, we're going to have more efforts around end of year giving and planned giving, which we really hadn't been able to do that before because we weren't fully staffed. So we were able to do a couple of the things around the consumable services like we focused on, and also get fully staffed, which will position us well for the future. Let's see, two more here. The Human Resources Director, which that's Jennifer, will review policies and practices to ensure MCPL provides internal opportunities for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this activity did occur throughout most of 2021. Part of that report was the goal. Part of I think obtaining this was the report from Hicks Carter Hicks and the review that we had at the October meeting. The HR team has continued to work on updating job descriptions, undertaking salary studies, and things like that, which will be useful as we move into the 22-23 budgeting cycle. But all of that aligning with this action step. And then the last action step that we had here is that the Chief Technology Officer, that's Brian Gash, will review the technology environment and ensure that the current direction and practices place the library in the best position to provide service in the future. And so a lot of the work that was done in IT this last year was challenging because two reasons really. The completion of the capital plan, a lot of our IT staff have to help with some of the things that are going on there, whether it's decommissioning or commissioning a new branch. But then also the pandemic with people working at home and working remotely put additional stress on the IT department. But with all of that, updates were made to consider flexibility, which do allow us to pivot the use of technology based on current conditions and public needs, which Brian wrote a pretty good report, I think, that talks about that. So some of the things that Brian's been working on, of course, obviously things like the MyFi2Go, but also working on things like allowing people to check out computers. So not just check out computers and use them in our libraries, but check them out and take them home if that's what we need to do. If that's what, if we can't have people in our buildings for some reason, then we might be able to allow people to check out our computers and take them home. And by computers, I'm talking about the laptop computers, obviously, not the big machines. And so just as an example of some of the things that he was working on. So I feel like in terms of looking at our capacity pillars that are in the strategic plan, that we reviewed them all. We saw that we were making some good headway on all of them, and felt like we were doing some good work there. I did ask each member of my team to write up a report on more detail about each one of these, which is in the supporting documents, except for the capital maintenance plan. Because as I mentioned at this point, I think the wise thing for us to do is to try putting together a budget for what it's going to cost, and then start figuring out planning later as we start getting closer to actual action. So let me pause before I get to the fourth one. So the fourth goal was evaluate the strategic plan priorities and progress. So part of what we did when we did the strategic plan, I think back in 2018, if I remember right, was that we tried to build it in such a way so it wasn't a checklist. It wasn't do this, do this, do this, and then when you're all done with the checklist, then you do a new strategic plan. What we tried to do is build the strategic plan in such a way that as long as our world that we live in is the same world, as long as things don't change significantly, then we just keep working on the same goals until those change, and then we do something different. So one of the keys to a plan like that is that every so often you have to stop and make sure that everything is, all your assumptions are still right. And so that was kind of the goal of this goal. So, so the first one here is evaluate data inputs and demographics. We gave ourselves a yes on this, but we didn't get quite as far as I would have hoped because, generally speaking, Katina keeps her eye, Katina Jones, who reports to you every quarter, she keeps her eye on this stuff all the time for us and continually evaluates our community demographics. And ideally, our hope was there would have been more of the 2020 census out in 2021, but there wasn't for any number of different reasons. And so we were making some initial progress. We learned that I think all of our communities grew and grew by some significant numbers. That the Mid-Continent District, we understand, the size of our district actually grew faster than what we thought it was. I think we're up to 640,000 or something like that in terms of population. But we weren't able to make the deep dive that we would have hoped that we would have been able to make this year, in large part just because the census didn't come out as broadly as we would have hoped. So we were kind of at the mercy of the Department of Commerce on some of that. But we do feel like we did a good job for what we did have. Next up was to develop 2 to 4 community needs assessments once public health situations makes it possible. We didn't get this one done. And much of this was because of the Delta surge and then the Omicron surge later in the year made it impossible for us to get people together to do the community needs assessments like we wanted to do. So what we did instead was we started working on a strategy for the one below, where we're going to develop a structure for community needs assessment at the branch and community level. And we did this. So each one of our branches are each one of our service areas. So like, for example, Blue Springs is one service area, and Blue Springs North and South work together. Camden Point, Dearborn, and Edgerton, I believe, are one service area, and those 3 branches work together. And so we created areas where our service areas are starting to work on a community needs assessment for each one of their branches. And then our hope is, as we complete our community needs assessment there, then we're going to roll those up to the system level, as opposed to trying to do the 2 to 4 community needs assessments that were up above. So basically we punted the one in the middle, but we punted that one because instead of going top down, we're going bottom up. And so we're a little behind. So I say we didn't do one of these, but we did the bottom one, and it's actually going to position us to do the middle one. So in terms of evaluating the strategic plan, we discovered that we're still, our strategic priorities are still solid. Helping people obtain literacy skills, helping people get the skills they need to operate in their communities, whether it's business skills or any number of different things. Helping people have the skills to tell their own story. All of those are still valid, and all of our numbers are our community numbers are suggesting that those are still the areas where we should be working. So so with that said, if you go back up and each one, I never weigh any of these. I just one is worth one. And so if you go up here in terms of what we feel in terms of our grading, we feel we got 13 of 15 of the action steps, which means roughly 86%, 86% attainment. So that concludes the report for the 2021. And I think we should probably pause before we go into 2022.
If you have any questions, I think you should ask them now. The way this usually works is we ask our questions now, and then when we go into closed session, we can discuss the actual number, but that's not a time. This part is an open session. The actual number is in closed session.
So I had a question. Are the different goals weighted in terms of?
No,
Okay.
we don't. At least this year we did. In fact, now I'm thinking about it, Joycelyn, you may help me remember. I don't think we've ever done weighted goals with the director.
Never
It's
done
usually just
Because
one equals one.
Yeah, some of this struck me as being incredibly important, and other ones are certainly important, but not of the same gravity in terms of the big picture. So,
Well, certainly in terms of effort, there were some that the effort was much more considerable, much more.
absolutely.
And in
Yeah,
terms
sorry.
of what's actually in our ability to control.
Well, there's that too. Yeah, there are some things that are out of our control. Yeah.
So you had 4 main goals and then these other ones, are your
Actions.
sub-goals or action points or something. Okay. And Steve, I mean, I think it's understandable, these years have been crazy, that some things you cannot do because maybe, craziness that's happening. So I don't know, I think at some point we need to talk about that should not be reflected in, if this is tied with your bonuses and it's something you can't do, I think we need to,
That's a good discussion that we can have in the closed session, and certainly the prerogative that we can talk about. My report, though, is it's really just meant to be a straight up report. I said I was going to do this. Here's what happened. So.
Yeah, how we weight those, that's the closed session item, but the actual discussion of what happened, this is a report that the public should also know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and speaking of the report, this is something I'm a little proud of, and I really don't like patting myself on the back, but I know very few library directors that do things like put their strategic goals on the public website. It's a practice that I've had for a long time. I think our public should know what I'm trying to work on. So yeah, if you go to mymcpl.org and poke around enough, you'll find my goals on there.
If there are no other questions, we can go on to 2022.
Okay.
I did what about that, but procedurally, so we are going into closed session today
Yes.
for,
Personnel reasons. I mean, so in essence, you are evaluating me on the goals. And so that's
Okay.
a reason to go into closed session.
This is not a general evaluation,
Got it.
that happens at another time, but
Right.
evaluating on the goal achievement in terms of coming up with a number.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next up would be 2022 goals. And now this one, I did structure this one a little differently than what we just looked at. So one of the things I started off with, and this is in deference to request that I think Ron made this request to me, and I think it's a good request, is that we've got a lot of new board members. So sometimes it's a good idea to have a little bit of a history lesson of how we got from here to there. And so the first paragraph on the 2022 goals talks a little bit about that, how we got from here to there. And so we used to, up and through 2006, Mid-Continent Public Library had a strict sort of civil servant step and grade system. So you had a certain pay grade and you were on step 1, and the next year you're on step 2. As long as you're still breathing, the next year you're on step 3, and you just kept going. And that changed when the new library director was hired in 2006, and actually I was hired as assistant director at that point. The senior leadership slowly transitioned into a goals and a pay for performance system, and that's language that we use intentionally. technically, in the state of Missouri, government employees cannot be paid a bonus. It's illegal, but they can be paid for their performance. And so we have a pay for performance system, not a bonus system. And so that transition was made initially with the upper administration and then slowly went down to the middle administration. Right in the middle of the Great Recession, we were still making these changes. And then it finally ended, the transition completed around 2010, where we actually put all of our staff on a performance management system as opposed to the old step and grade system. So the other thing that was different about this is that when Dick Wilding and I first became the director and assistant director, we both decided that we were going to share our goals and then we would sink and swim together. And we started doing this and then started passing this down. And then from 2018 to 2021, it wasn't just the director and assistant director, but director and the entire senior leadership team, all those people that I mentioned sort of by name when we were talking about the pillars. We started linking our goals together. Up until this point too, the goals were pretty much a lengthy checklist. Joyce can attest to this. Our goals were kind of single spaced, and there's just lots and lots of stuff to do. And every year the personnel committee are going, there's no way you're going to get this done. And,
Every year you do.
and somehow we would always get it done. And so we tried this other method last year, the last 2 years, but I kind of went back almost to a checklist again. That is essentially kind of a checklist that focuses the senior administrative team. So all the goals that we're talking about, although they're technically the director's goals, because as the board, you direct me, okay? But the agreement is that the agreement that we come to, I also push out to my team. So this actually provides direction for the entire senior leadership team. And so what I have here is just a series of a few tasks, as well as how to measure once we've got to the completion point. So the first one that I have are the yes, please.
Okay, just also to clarify for who's ever new, so this is different than your job description.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
This is sort of on top of it.
Yes.
But some of the things can, I mean, of course, obviously can and do crossover.
Mm-hmm.
So these are just maybe the most important things for the next year.
That's the
that
way
you feel are the most important.
That's the way I looked at it. Yes.
What you should concentrate on, because obviously, I mean, some of this does cross. All of it has to cross into your job description.
Yeah.
So, so these are maybe the priorities. Would you say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would say that. And so for example, I think the first year that we tried to execute the capital plan, I don't think the capital plan is in the director's goals, execution of the capital plan, because I just believe that's the price of admission. You hired me to do this thing, and this is part of what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
But part of what we're looking at here is more along the lines of focus, because they're, got a pretty large job description. So a lot of this is around focus and making sure that we get some of the most important things finished. So yeah, I mean, I think you articulated it correctly.
I just have a question. Maybe this is more for Joycelyn. So is the goal today for us to review these and maybe vote on them?
Vote to recommend to the full board that
these are the things we feel are important?
what is important, I think, for the leadership is to communicate to the director what's the most important. He's saying these are things that he believes it should be the focus, and we're giving our vote to approve this.
Right.
Bring it to the full board, would say, yes, you're on the right track, so that there's better communication, and he's our one employee, he should know where we're.
Right. Well, I just feel like I've got to maybe interject this here. I don't want to waste time. It just seems odd. This is an odd way to do it, that it with that, we appreciate Steve's input on these, but also I feel like not even us, but I mean, every board member that if there's any way we could give people a month, 2 weeks to say, what is most important for you? So we can synthesize something that represents what our governing board wants our one employee to concentrate on. So I don't know if procedurally, if we can talk about this, like, is there a way that we can take Steve's suggestions, because he has great suggestions, but I know that I have some of my own suggestions, and I think we need to allow the full board, if they want to, maybe people don't want to, before we just say, okay, it's this or nothing.
I understand your point. I think you
Does that
make
make
a good
sense?
point. I think you make a good point, Yummy. I think I would caution the board though to keep a line between direction and micromanagement. I think we have a skilled director who understands the mission and vision for libraries, who's a trained master's level in library science individual. And I think that who knows the entire district and the capacity of the library. And I think there is room for input.
Yeah.
But I think that we also need to respect the expertise that none of us on the library board
Well,
has.
that's why we have, we're taking his suggestions. But, as I read our policies, we're the governing board.
Mhm.
And I do believe that we need to roll up our sleeves and maybe do a little more than we have been doing, as far as it's like Steve's doing his job and our job. And I just think it's not even fair to Steve. I think we do need to really listen closely to his suggestions, but I think we also need to roll up our sleeves and do what we're here to do.
And I'm open to that. I mean, I'm always been open to direction. So I'm open to direction like that. I will say that the goals that I put down are influenced by the amount of time that I do spend with the board in the committee meetings and listening to what the committee members want me to do. But yeah, point taken. There's no reason why we couldn't add goals tonight, that we couldn't add goals between now and next board meeting, that we couldn't add more goals
I'm just not
for
comfortable
the next month.
with, with voting on this tonight. I don't know if it's on the agenda because my vote would be no, and I don't.
No, we don't have to vote on these tonight.
Okay, so can I just want to make a suggestion, and it may even do it in the form of a motion that, let me just, this is not a motion right now, but I mean, I think we need to consider how we can, I think this is just a bad idea to just give people 2 days, because I feel like I just got these in 2 days to look over something I think is very important, that I think we do need to have at least a few weeks.
But this is not a rush document.
Okay.
Okay, this is not a rush document. This is a document to take a look at what Steve's goals are. If these sounds great, we can vote on it tonight. If we're like, no, we want to make some changes, then I would suggest that the committee submit those changes to myself and Steve so that we can look at them or what the suggestions are, so we could put it on a future agenda to address that.
Okay.
I just want to avoid a situation which is unmanageable where there are 12 different directions being given. This is a way for us to manage one set of goals that we can all agree on, and that's a process. This does not have to be done today.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Well, I think if we can think of ways we could do that, and if people have suggestions for goals, that they be presented not just to you and Steve, but to the whole committee, that we can.
The process of presenting it to me and Steve is so that we can make sure all the suggestions are disseminated through all the the community.
Yeah, so. you
Rather
need
than
to
one
submit-
person talking
Right.
and no one get the full thing. It's a way to manage the information so that we make sure all members, whether they're at meetings or not, have the same information.
Right, so I just want to make sure that if we can all turn in suggestions and then we'll all be able to see that. I don't want to get
Yes.
to the next meeting and be surprised and need
I am
another.
all about transparency.
Right. And,
Yes.
and I'll give you an analog to this. So an analogy is that when the finance committee does the budget, that when board members have recommendations for budget adjustments and amendments, those all go through the finance chair so that they can all get collected in one place and disseminated out to one place.
Well,
And so similar sort of thing. If they can all go to Joyceland, then we can make sure that everybody sees them.
it may come down to, we have to vote on each individual task because there may be some that I don't know of any other way to do it because there may be some that I'm not going to vote on a total document, yes or no. So there may.
That would be a recommendation that you can make at any point in time. I just think that in terms of part of the issue of submitting suggestions, whatever, is part of it is transparency and documentation, record keeping, and keeping the board informed. All of the procedures that we operate under help us and our records manager to comply with our requirements through the state and through just
I'm in
governance.
total agreement with that.
So if you submit it, we will take a look at it. But I think it needs to be compiled and it needs to be recorded along the way so that we have transparency in our process.
Yes, I agree. If we submit something, I just want to understand the process. So if Ron submits a suggestion or a goal to you, then it will go out to everybody.
No, it will be presented in a meeting. We can't have meetings. I can't be sending information out.
Well,
That's
I just think.
May I finish, please? I'm just trying to explain to you the process. If I send out information outside of a process where that information can be in open records, that's a violation. The way we have a governing document, we have a way we've been managing, and if we're going to change that, then we need to change that process.
It's not what I'm saying.
Well, what I'm saying is the way that's best for us to manage it. You send the information to me, we will put it on the agenda, and the information will be put in board docs.
If
For
we
everyone
can
to
have
see.
that, I'm just saying, I don't want to get to this point again. So maybe at least
This is
a week before, so we would have time to really digest
Now-
this information.
Okay, let me clarify. We're not going to vote on this tonight. Okay, we're not going to vote on this tonight. Technically, we don't have to vote on this tonight. But what we wanted to do was to gather the information and get it to this committee. When this committee is ready to pass it on to the full board, then we'll pass it on to the full board to look at and to come up. The full board can at any time follow our process. And that's part of the reason why we don't send information out willy-nilly, is because all board members can tune in and see where we are in the process and make suggestions all along the way. That's part of our transparency for board, part of our transparency for the community.
Okay, my suggestion is if we can have a date set to where all suggestions could be turned in by this time and then relayed back to the board.
Right now, it's still in committee.
Relayed back to the
Yeah.
committee then.
Yeah, people can send me their suggestions anytime between now and the next committee meeting if we're not ready to move forward on it.
And is
But we
there,
need to deal with this, whether or not we're going to move forward before we decide on whether there's a date for,
well, okay, I just feel.
there's like several different processes in that.
Yeah, I just didn't want Steve, we've hopefully all read this, so I don't know if Steve needs to go through everyone point by point, especially for time's sake. So
I tell you,
I don't know.
let's do this. Steve, if you're okay with this, give people time to
Yeah,
digest
well,
this.
and I was gonna recommend the following timetable if we can.
Okay.
So February 15th is our board meeting. And what I'd like to recommend is that as part of the Personnel Committee report, Personnel Committee would report out that there were these lists of staff recommended goals. And that everyone can look at that, and that everyone could look at those, give any review or any recommendations for additional goals to Joycelyn no later than the 22nd. So that's a full week after the next board meeting. And then the next Personnel Committee meeting, if I'm not mistaken, would be March 9th.
Yeah.
At which point the Personnel Committee could take all those recommendations as well as anything else, put together a recommendation in time potentially for the next board meeting on March the 15th. The only caveat, which I think is fine, I have no problem with that. The only caveat I'm going to give you is that by the time we get to March 15th, we are about a third of the way through the year.
Yeah.
And so it is decreasing the amount of time that I can actually achieve the goals.
Understandable.
But that's just putting that out there. But I think that this timeline would work just fine.
Well, there's one thing I think is missing is that before the March 9th meeting is that if you can get the suggestions in a document to, maybe by March 1st or something to the Personnel Committee.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I mean, so we would gather those up and then that would be March, would it be March 1st? Yeah, March 1st would be fine. Yeah, so March 1st, staff would get those, would compile those, and I'd have Teresa send that out so that we stay on the right side of the sunshine law. And
Yes.
And so you all would have those roughly 8 days before the next Personnel Committee meeting. I think we can do that. Shouldn't be a problem at all.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm not going to read these, except to tell you that there's at least one typo or two typos in here that I've already found and I've already corrected on my version. But please feel free to copy edit as well as content edit anything that you see on here. Yeah, let's.
I'm always available to answer questions, to take suggestions, to take input that then we can put in. I think that in terms of just efficiency and expediency, the more we can have before our meetings, the better off we are. So feel free, and I welcome your feedback.
I do want to mention one, because there's one though, the one that's evaluate CARES and ARP funds. That one might seem like it's a little bit price of admission, but I'm gonna warn you, this is the bureaucratic trap. I mean, this happens with every governmental entity. You get grant funding, you get a new program, the new program goes, and then you forget to evaluate it. And before you know it, you're doing something for 5 years and you've never really evaluated it because it was all grant funded. It was free money. This is what I wanted to make sure we didn't do. We actually went in the places that these large technology programs that were grant funded, that we go in and we look at them and make sure that they're doing what we thought they were going to do, so that we don't actually transfer those to our ongoing expenses if they're not actually doing what we thought they were going to do. I just think it's a prudent thing that everyone should do, but it's one of these things that I really wanted to make sure that we did. I thought it was a good use of resources. So anyway, just wanted to underscore that one, because that one does feel a little bit like price of admission, but it's intentionality. In that case, that's where I'm going to make a note on our calendar here on my board docs, because I didn't do that when I was writing it down. But that's what we have. So.
Okay. It might be helpful to have that timeline sent out to the board so that no one's caught with any surprises. Okay. Teresa, do we have any visitors' comments?
No, we do not.
All right. Okay, at this point, we can move into a discussion about poker performance in closed session.
We have a 5-minute break.
Yeah, well, it'll
We're
take
gonna
that,
lose Michelle.
and it'll take that long for
Yeah,
Cody
yeah.
to set up the closed session.
So I
So,
would say.
so we'll need the vote to go into closed session, and Cody can lose all staff except Susan Ray. And then when we're back, we'll be back. But it'll take Cody about 5 minutes to get us back into closed session. So.
I so moved.
Okay, you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Aye.